Welcome to the Pitch webinar. My name's Christopher Goodfellow and I'm part of the team that runs the Pitch. We're going to be talking today about running a side hustle and particularly how you test your ideas. So we're seeing lots of really cool and creative stuff around testing whether a business idea is valid, and then also some really clever ways to approach building an MVP that just doesn't cost much. So we want to talk to a founder that's been through that process. He'll join us in a moment, Sina. And he can share some insights on what that's like, some practical tips on how you can do it. And this is all about kind of bootstrapping. It's all about doing as much as you can with what you have. So hopefully there'll be some really practical, helpful stuff for you to take away from today's session. Hopefully you're watching on YouTube. There is a chat window on the right. So do drop comments in there if there's anything you want to ask. I'll pick those up. And just quickly before we get into the questions introducing Sina, I also wanted to thank our Sage, who are the Pitch's headline sponsor this year. And they've also helped us establish the Side Hustle stream this year. So as well as having the Pitch regional finals around the country, we also had an online final for founders like Sina who are running their business as a side hustle. Which is really, really successful. So we had over 4,500 people watch that stream, and it's still on our account. So do check that out. There's some amazing pitches in there. For those of you that don't know Sage, they offer an incredible accounting software tool. And if you are just starting out, I thoroughly recommend getting some software in place. Don't rely on spreadsheets. It just takes a huge amount of time and effort, and it won't produce the reports you need to run your business effectively. So if you are starting out, if you haven't got that in place already, do have a look at Sage. We thoroughly recommend them. So yeah, I'd love to jump into the interview then. So Sina, if you want to just pop yourself off mute, say hello and just kind of introduce who you are.
Hey Chris, hey everyone listening and watching. Thank you so much for inviting me. My name's Sina. Great to meet everyone. I am the CEO of Wing and co-founder of Wing. Wing is an in-person networking tool which basically tries to innovate the whole process of generating leads in person and basically trying to eradicate paper business cards entirely from businesses. And yeah, we pitched for the side hustle competition a few weeks ago, I guess now. Came very, very close second, which I'm still kind of mad about. But yeah, it was an amazing experience, and I'm really glad to be here with you as well.
Brilliant. Thanks for joining us. And yeah, I think you missed out by 1 point.
It was
So
1 point, yeah.
yeah, it was an incredibly strong heat this year. So, but well done for getting so
Yeah,
close.
everyone was incredible with that competition. So yeah, massive credit to everyone.
Yeah, brilliant. And so take us back to the very start of your journey with Wing then. Like, where did this idea kind of first come from?
So I guess a bit more about Wing, like explaining how the product works. It's an in-person networking tool which basically uses NFC, so near field communication, the same technology that Apple Pay or Google Pay uses. So the way that it'll work is that you literally would tap on the back of someone's phone with the product as a physical product. And then all your information will pop up. So I can show you very, very quickly how it works because it's a very visual product. People don't really understand it until you tell them. So this is my phone. This is what our product looks like. So this is custom to a business. Tap on the back of your phone like that, on their phone, comes up the notification, and then their profile pops up. So we support about 50 different social platforms such as LinkedIn, Instagram, WeChat for like Chinese people. So we support loads of different social platforms. And if there isn't one, then we like very quickly add it. We have a cool little add to contacts button as well, which I'll show you. So you press that and it links to the contacts app on your phone. For someone like me as well, my name's quite difficult to spell. So someone can like save my information with one tap, which is really cool. And the reason why I guess back to your question, the reason why I had the idea is because I would go to events kind of all the time. And sometimes people would have paid business cards, sometimes they wouldn't. I went to an event recently, actually. Let me show you. This is crazy. Like I come out of the event and I had all of this. Like people, it's really like bad for the planet. People don't realize, but about 23 million paper business cards are thrown away daily. That's equivalent to 1,000 trees being cut down a day. And it's one of these things that I saw as an easy fix because they're very outdated. They're very boring. They needed to be innovated. And I saw so much innovation within online networking during the pandemic, like Hopin and Zoom, obviously, which we're using now, became very prevalent, but nothing for in-person came out. And I broke down the problems of in-person networking into three different parts. So before you meet that individual, as you meet that individual, and then after you meet that individual. And I saw there were problems at each one of those segments. And so I thought the middle one is probably the easiest one to solve at the beginning because we were in the middle of the pandemic. It's probably the easiest one for us to test. And so that's how we came up with this product. And yeah, we ended up selling it on Instagram. I think we'll go into that in a second. So that's how I came up with the idea originally, is breaking down the I guess in-person networking flows, and realized that there were so many problems that were prevalent for businesses that rely on in-person networking for sale. That's another thing. So that's kind of how the idea came about.
Nice. Yeah, we'll get into like how you built that initial and got MVP and got the sales in a moment. But just to be interested to know, like, what was it like starting a business during lockdown? Like, we all had sort of very different, but sometimes quite isolating experiences. So yeah, talk me through that.
It was one of those experiences where I guess personally I had a lot of time. That was another thing. I had a lot of time to experiment with new ideas. And I saw this new technology came out called NFC, which it's not that new, but a lot of phones started supporting it for how you just saw my phone use it without having an app. So with our product, no one needs an app for it to be used, which is a cool thing for iOS and Android. And I saw someone using it for like Wi-Fi password codes and stuff like that, basically in his shed. And I was like, can I experiment with that for in-person networking? And so I ordered some and I ended up like experimenting. And yeah, I built a very, very basic version of the product using third-party software, none of our own software, no website or anything like that. I think it came down to the time element that I had, as well as I guess all these software tools that are available right now that before didn't exist. So it's very easy to start a business very quickly that people don't really might not realize. But starting a business now in this age, it's incredibly easy. That's the amazing thing. Like before, if you think about it, if you wanted to build a business like I don't know, any sort of software business, I guess, you have to buy all these servers, you have to probably put them in an office, all these different things that you don't need to do now. It's all kind of AWS, or they're all kind of hosted by third-party softwares that you integrate in, and they don't need to see their branding. It could all be like white label to your own brand. So all these different tools you can use, like even Google Sheets and stuff like that, Google Forms, that make getting traction early for a business like ours very easy. And so that's another reason why we started in the middle of the pandemic, because it kind of became more apparent to me that all these tools existed. And so that's kind of how we started, I guess. And it's probably a blessing in disguise, because we ended up selling our products in the pandemic when people weren't even networking. And so the analogy, I mean, we've spoken a few times, the analogy I used with you before was people were buying our products, but they couldn't use them properly to the full extent. And the analogy I always use is if people are buying ice cream in the middle of winter, that's probably good ice cream. And so with us, like we always thought once lockdown eases, and it was always going to ease eventually, our products will take off, and we'd have that foundation of testing very early with, early adopters that, didn't rely on actually using it in the proper way, if that made sense. They were very, very diehard early adopters.
Great. And just run us through like that initial technology stack. Like you mentioned using a few different services, but what were the main
Yeah.
things that facilitated it working right at the beginning?
So I used a similar technology to Linktree. I guess Linktree is like a very popular one. So it's very similar to that, to basically build like a Linktree sort of UI of like different links. But I didn't own the software. So I had to set up an account with them each time someone would buy it. So like a fake account each time. And I'd use 10-minute mail for that. And I'd have to basically keep a spreadsheet of the different emails as well as the passwords of each one. And it was not scalable whatsoever. But so the way the flow would work was someone would buy the product from Instagram. So we didn't have a website. Someone would buy it from Instagram, and I would send them like a PayPal link. So that's the first thing. That's the first tool I use. This is Instagram and PayPal. They would then be sent over a Google form, which again I would craft. And the Google form would have, what would you want your profile picture to be? What do you want your first link, second link, third link to be? What do you want your background to look like? All these different things, that they can do on our like website right now, but they couldn't do back then, to customize. So I would get that information, as well as obviously like shipping address and stuff like that would be in the form. I would, use 10-minute mail to make a fake email address, and then like make a fake account with this Linktree sort of competitor, and then basically customize their profile to how they wanted it from the Google form. And then I'd program the chip myself using like an app on my phone. and then I basically like ship it out to them. So that was it, and that's how we got our first sort of like 30 users. And yeah, so it's like an abundance of tools. The one thing that was probably difficult in that is if they wanted to edit their profile, then they have to email me or message me directly, and then I have to go back to the software and change it myself. It's very, very manual, but we kind of streamlined that process in like we built a Slack channel, and we built like a launch group within that Slack channel. So everyone like early customers would be in that channel, and they're still there actually, to be fair. And they would bring up like them using it as well as ideas that they have and any feedback that they have. So it was a very cool group of early adopters that we had in this group. And they were from around the world as well. They weren't from just the UK, but they were from Italy and Israel and all across the world. So yeah, we use Slack for feedback, and then we use like all those different tools for like the order flow before we built a website as well as the software that we hosted ourselves.
So tell me about how you made your first sale and then put together that kind of beta group of 30 customers.
So in my mind, I had no idea that people would actually buy stuff on Instagram. That for me was just such a weird concept. I didn't think people would do. Like I thought people would have to either go into a shop or go onto a website for it to look really nice, all that type of thing. And so when I first put stuff on Instagram, it wasn't for people to buy. That wasn't my intention. The reason why I put it on Instagram is to basically grow followers to eventually get them to convert to a website once we build it. That was in my mind, that was the intention. But when I put the technology on Instagram, like showing a video of how it worked, we got, I think, 2 or 3 messages from random people I'd not met before, just from people sharing on Instagram and things like that, saying, "Oh, this is really cool. Where can I buy it? I can't see your website." And I was like, "Well, we're not actually selling it at the moment. Like, there's nothing to sell. We don't have software. We don't have anything really." And it was like, "No, like, how much for the one that you showed in the video? I can just buy that one." I was like, "I don't know, like £5." Like it's so low, because I was just surprised that he even messaged me in the first place. And yeah, he was like, "Yeah, what's easier? Like PayPal is okay?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure." So I sent it to him, and he paid straight away. So that was our first customer. It was very strange. I didn't think that would happen. And then from there, we got 30 more. And yeah, then we expanded to a landing page that didn't have a payment infrastructure linked to it. We should have probably used Shopify in the early days, a lesson that we learned. But we use like Square to like power our payments in the back end. Yeah, we always like move very incrementally with like as least development time as we can do, because I eventually got my friends involved that are both developers, but they're again part-time, so we were like trying to minimize as much development as we could. So yeah, it's very much been like bootstrap since today.
Nice. And you mentioned this phrase when we were chatting previously, the Wizard of Oz MVP. Like, can you tell us or explain to the audience what that means? Me and the audience what that means, and then also like, is that what you kind of considered that you did, or is what you did sort of slightly different from that?
Yeah, so there's loads of different types of MVPs. You can search this up if you just Google it. You can be fairly academic with this, because I've seen so many people do some incredible MVPs, and I think the reason why people do MVPs is to show that there is traction there before fully building out what you're doing, and that's just to show that you're in the right direction, the problem's big enough for you to solve, and whether you have a customer base, stuff like that, that people would actually engage with your product. And my initial sort of thinking for an MVP was, well, just I guess to build traction before we did an MVP was to just build a following on Instagram, as I said, and I mean they would convert to a website. But as time went on and people were actually buying on Instagram, for me, I was like, okay, I need to build something that people can actually use, because people are actually engaging with this now before we build a website. I didn't have developers at that time. And so the Wizard of Oz MVP, I guess, was in theory what it is on the front end, everything looks very clean for the user. It looks incredibly clean, looks very professional. But on the back end, it's all these like third-party tools that look very, very messy, but the founder knows what they're doing. So it could be like Google Sheets, it could be Excel, it could be like a whole host of different softwares all mashed together. It could be anything really. And for me, it was like 10-minute mail, copy and pasting that into this third-party software, building it myself. It's all these very manual things. But for the consumer, they pay on Instagram. They give me their address, and I just ship it. Like it's in their post box like within a week. So for them, the experience is very seamless, it's very clean, and they get a UI that's also very clean, because I use a third-party software that was very good. So for them, they were loving the experience. Obviously, it's up until a point, like they couldn't do customization themselves. They have to rely on me. But like the MVP, the whole point of it is to get early traction and to get early numbers where you can prove that there is a use case here, some early product market fit. So then you can move on to development time. So you don't develop stuff too early because otherwise you're wasting time and money in that instance. But there's loads of different types of MVP. That was just the one that we opted for.
Great. And talk to me a little bit about the money side of things. So, like, how much did you kind of put into this at the start? And what are you looking for in terms of investment?
We I guess I graduated from uni that summer before just that summer of the pandemic, I guess. So my job was delayed. So I had all this time, didn't have really that much money because I literally just graduated. And so in my mind, I was trying to be as frugal as possible in the early stages. And so I think at the beginning, maybe spent about £500 in total. And that was on the first supplier on of the chips. That was on, I guess, a bit of early branding, like logos and things. Yeah, that was it really. That we didn't need anything else. All these other softwares were free. We didn't need to pay for them, like Google Forms, Google Sheets, and all these different types of things. We didn't need to pay for them. So we ended up making revenue very early. I know we're quite lucky in that sense. A lot of other businesses aren't like that. They need to raise some money in order to bring a product out. But we were in a very lucky sweet spot where we could make revenue very early, and then kind of use that revenue to reinvest into the business. But now we're focusing on more sophisticated software in the future, given that the pandemic's ease, that we can obviously talk about in a bit. But these are like B2B softwares that would track leads and track ROI of event attendance and things like that, that obviously require a bit more nuance and a bit more thought behind it, and more development time. And so now we're looking for probably around the sort of 300K mark. We've already got some like tentative investors that have said yes. But yeah, we're EIS and SEIS registered, so the risk was very low. And given that we're already making revenue now, we've signed some distribution deals as well with some third-party distributors. Yeah, it's fairly low risk, I would say, but we haven't actually gone out into the market that much because we don't actually need it at the moment. We're quite happy where we are, but once we kind of put our foot in the pedal of building these B2B softwares, then that's when we need that money.
Great. And when so you've got this sort of Wizard of Oz style MVP going, you've proven your idea, and I love that you've got that far and you've only spent sort of £500. So keeping the risk really, really low.
Yeah.
Building your confidence that this is something people want, that this is worth putting your time and perhaps the next 5-10 years even into. But tell me just that next immediate stage, like, was there a moment where you really felt like, oh, we've kind of stepped forward and away from that stuff that just doesn't scale at all to something that's like a bit more robust? Tell me about that phase.
I think it was when we got, say, 30 people actually using it day to day, and I got a lot of messages from people wanting to buy it, as well as messages from those existing customers saying, "Can I edit this? Can I edit that?" And it was just getting a bit too much of, I can't handle this inbound stuff as well as existing customers asking for changes. And so when I basically had to like beg like two of my developer friends to get on board. And as well, another thing that this MVP proved is that there is something here. And I was able to go to my developer friends and say, listen, like, people are actually using it and I don't even have software. So that means you can come onto the team, build our own software in house, and they would definitely use it because they're already using like a similar product. So it convinced them as well. That's another thing. So it allowed me to build a team, because at first, developers are very, very busy people. They're very high in demand. So I needed to have that to convince them to come onto the team. So yeah, that was the stage. It was just too much traffic, at least at the beginning. So the first thing we built from software point of view was basically a replica of that link tree, or like the other products, that whole like UI experience, because that was what people were used to. And now next stage, we're building like a better UI that's more geared towards like in-person networking rather than the whole link tree like UI. So yeah, that was the first thing we built, and then we built the website after that. So yeah, that's kind of how it happened.
Yeah, a lot of the stuff when I hear you talk kind of reminds me. I don't know if you're a fan of Reid Hoffman at all, but he talks a lot,
From LinkedIn.
and
Yeah.
yeah, and him and sort of Y Combinator generally talk a lot about sort of doing stuff that doesn't scale. And then not only that, like as you've done, you kind of you keep doing it until it gets to a point where it's like breaking, and then you kind of have
Mm.
to put out that fire. And I love that
Yeah.
philosophy.
Yeah. It's I guess it is difficult because you get to a stage where like, okay, yeah, something definitely needs to change now. But you might not be thinking about it until it's too late. That's the thing. So you have to build something again very, very quickly in order to sort of sustain this growth. So it's kind of like building patches over everything. And like, so yeah, eventually you get to a stage where you've built a bigger team and you can think more long term of like, okay, we can build things for the long term, which is why this B2B software comes in that we're building now. But again, with that, we are interviewing corporates and things like that. We're interviewing decision makers. We're interviewing people that go to all these different events, and as well the event providers, event organizers, to prove that there is something there. So it's a different type of MVP that we're building there. For them. So we're like trialing out like basic softwares with like NatWest is one of our partners that we're piloting this with. So it's different to the Wizard of Oz one because we're actually building something a bit better than that. Um, but it has to be to that level of scale if we're going to pilot with a bigger partner like NatWest, if that makes sense. But they only trust us to do that if they can see people using it already out there. And the way that we got to that stage was the very, gritty, original product. So yeah, it definitely, it goes step by step, and you do get to a stage where you're like, okay, we should stop doing this as sort of like patching over everything and kind of think a bit more long term. But it takes time to get to that stage where you're confident in actually doing that.
Yeah, and I think sometimes there is a little bit of a balance. Like I think sometimes when you walk to work in those first early years, it's kind of looking around and saying, which of the fires is the biggest, you know, that we're going to address first. And you almost can't solve everything at once. You kind of have to
Yeah.
prioritize. Okay, this I'm going to work on this part of the business. I'm going to work on this part of the software, whatever.
Yeah.
Fix that,
I
and move
think I
on.
think that's a really good point actually. I think for us, the prioritization for those different things comes to what do customers actually value for our product out of this. So like there's different elements to the business that we could definitely make better, such as the ordering process after they've ordered. So after they order, they still get a Google form and like fill out certain things if it's a bigger order. So we haven't automated that step yet because we would rather spend time on making the UI look better, making the experience better in terms of actually using it, rather than this step that they only have to do once and they might not get that much value from, if that makes sense.
Got
They
it.
won't share their experience when it comes to actually building like ordering, I suppose, but they'll share the process when they actually use it day to day, if that makes sense. So you have to see where the value is for your end user or customer, because they can be different actually depending on the sort of business you have, and then prioritize based on that as to where you want to go next and which file you want to put out. Because yeah, we've had a lot of like, I guess, feedback and like criticism about we could automate our ordering process. We've chosen not to in order to like prioritize on other things. So that, yeah, you can prioritize and like pick and choose, I guess, but we will eventually get to that. It's not like we shouldn't, but we will eventually get to that.
Yeah. And what about the running the company itself? Like, as you've grown over the last year or so, have you kind of brought in anything to sort of formalize the actual company itself outside of the product?
I think outside the product formalization, we're looking at different automation tools now, like Zapier. And obviously, we built a website where the payment flows are a bit more automated as well. Uh, so there's like a lot of different things, but at the moment, we're still focusing on the product. We and also another thing that we've done that would work for some businesses is that we know that the product's very good, and so our way of kind of using that to our advantage, but also building a flow where we get sort of consistent revenues without us actually doing, I guess, variable cost work, is that we've signed a distributor now that is going to be dealing with all our B2C growth, because B2C wasn't really a priority of ours because same thing, like we saw B2B as bigger deals. B2C wasn't an area of the business that I felt comfortable with, like because getting each customer on B2C is very difficult. Instagram ads, Facebook ads, all that type of thing. Some people are very good at it. So fair play to you, but that wasn't my area. And so outsourcing that to a company that can do that for us, and then they make a margin and we also make profit on that, is very good, because like we're not doing our own work in order to get those sales, if that makes sense. It's outsourced. And so building the different streams was also pretty important for us. And now we can redistribute that income into building the longer term vision of B2B softwares. So yeah, I think as well for us, a good point for vision is that we always think about it in terms of growing a business. You can either grow the number of customers, or you can grow the lifetime value of your existing customers. And so if you break it down into those two things, those are the only two ways to grow, by the way. So if you think about those two, which one is easier at the moment for you? And so for distribution, that will increase the number of customers. And for lifetime value, that's what we're focusing on long term, building this software so we can do, software subscription services and building more value where they would subscribe to a more premium service. And also they kind of feed into each other, because if you have a larger customer base and your conversion rate to like a premium software is like 2%, obviously 2% of a larger number is going to be more customers on that sort of premium package. So they feed into each other, but it's obviously you have to pick and choose which one you want to prioritize and then build systems around that one.
Yeah. And what about the accounting software side? So obviously, you're cash strapped effectively, you're trying to bootstrap and grow, get as much as you can from what you have. So when did you first bring that in, and what was that experience like?
So for a long time, yeah, as I said, like our beginnings were very, very informal. Nothing was really like structured. And with that was also our accounts. So our accounts were fairly messy at the beginning. And I realized very quickly, yeah, if we're going to make this to a formal business, because at the beginning it was just me kind of experimenting in my bedroom. I didn't think it would grow to the level it is now. And so very quickly after a few months of trading, I realized, okay, we need to formalize this process of accounting because it was getting too messy, especially for bigger orders. And so that's when we brought in Sage to basically deal with all that accountancy side, so I don't have to like fumble around with these Excel spreadsheets. Accounting is something that I don't want to spend that much time with. I'd rather spend time actually growing the business and spending more thought into that. That's just where my energy goes, as well as like where I'm interested in. And so I was very quick to try to build a structure where I don't have to deal with accounts as much. And I think Sage just made a lot of sense for us at that point in time.
Brilliant. And we just had one quick question from somebody watching. So what's the biggest lesson you've learned from running a side hustle?
That's a very good question. And I think the lesson for me is prioritizing time to the areas of the business that would actually deliver growth and value. I know it's a very vague answer, but for me, if I wasn't working on this part-time, I guess, it's very easy to spend a lot of time on things that don't matter. So if your time, limited on certain tasks, you'll find ways to be more creative for them. So that doesn't just go for this business, by the way. It goes for a lot of other tasks that you do. So one thing that I do is, for productivity purposes, I make a to-do list and I allocate time specifically to that one task. So because it's very tempting to just spend a long time on that one task, but it's not the most effective ways of doing things. And so when you're time poor, you do find creative ways of doing tasks. So yeah, that's the biggest lesson I've learned, is how to prioritize my time into doing things a bit more creatively.
Oh, that's a lovely answer. And I remember reading in Biz Stone's book about sort of the early days of Twitter that, he really thinks that creativity comes from restraint. Like actually, if you have a ton of cash and resources, like you're not forced to be as innovative, as creative as somebody that's, in your position perhaps, or, has limited technology or limited cash. And I think that's just one of the things I find most beautiful about some of the founders I meet, is kind of what they've done with what they have and how they problem solved in a way that's like really clever.
Yeah, that's why, Chris, I know there's obviously a balance to this, but I'm a big advocate of starting a business on the side to whatever you're doing, rather than just quitting your job immediately and going full force again for it. And the reason why is because if you go full time on it, well, firstly, you don't know whether people would actually, like the product and like what you're trying to do. That's the first thing. So you haven't actually proven product market fit. But the second thing is you're forcing yourself to be as productive and as creative as possible on your business part time. Because if you can grow that business part time to the stage where you're very happy with it, if you go full time on that, it would only go up. Because you've proven everything in a creative way, in a low cost way, low time way, all these different type of things. So if you were to put more money towards it, if you were to put more time towards it, it will grow because you've proven that. So that's why I'm a big advocate of doing things on the side, at least at the beginning. So yeah.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. I really appreciate the time there, Sina. I think that's a lovely point to end it on. And it's some really practical stuff there, and hopefully just gets people thinking about how they could be creative in their own entrepreneurial journey, and whether they're right at the start or they've got a product already. So thanks so much for your insight there.
My pleasure. Thank you so much. If anyone's listening and wants to ask a few more questions, they're shy or whatever, then yeah, you can just message me on LinkedIn as well.
Brilliant. And we do have a huge amount of side hustle content on the Pitch website. So have a look at that. It's thepitch.co.uk. There's a side hustle section. There's lots of different guides on sort of managing your finances, knowing when to make the leap and go full time, basically everything you need and to sort of learn about that process. The side hustle final that Sina took part in is also available on our YouTube channel. And finally, the pitch final is on the 27th of October. The in-person event is sold out, but we will be streaming that. So if you are interested to see the best 10 founders we found from across the UK, do tune into that YouTube stream. And thanks again to Sina and our partners, Sage, for supporting the event. I really appreciate you watching and backing what we do.
Thank you so much.